Today on Marital Monkey Mania. Marriage and family therapist Dr. Cory Allen, also the founder of Sexy Marriage Radio, coming right up on
Marital Monkey Mania.
This is John, aka the Blind Fury.
And this is Tanya, aka wife of the Blind Fury.
And we are your host for Marital Monkey Mania.
He's a master certified coach.
She's a certified relationship coach.
And he's a master certified relationship coach.
Marital Monkey would like to thank the Invisible Man Ministries. David was mentally and physically abused as a child. He felt no one could see him, so he would yell just to get attention. Then God gave David the gift of writing poetry. It was through this writing that God began to heal David's heart. This poetry can be found in one of David's many books. To see a listing of these books, go to maritalmonkey.com, click on sponsors, and there you will find the information. There, you will also find a link to his podcast, The Invisible Man Ministries, bringing healing through poetry. Welcome back to Marital Monkey Mania, and right now we're going to welcome our special guest. This guy is the founder of the Sexy Marriage Radio. He's been doing that running up on 10 years now, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. He is also a marriage and family therapist and has his own practice down deep in the heart of Texas. So I am very excited to welcome in Dr. Cory Allen, PhD.
That's redundant. If you do the doctor and the PhD, those are the same thing. So
I know, but I was just enjoying the moment because I've never introduced a PhD. So I had to enjoy it just for that moment.
Okay. Well, I get you. It's good to be here.
Well, it's so good to have you. So tell us a little bit about Sexy Marriage Radio. What started it and how you got started doing the podcast and how it's going now?
So what started it was I had begun blogging under a different title of Simple Marriage, which is an oxymoron, I realize, but it makes sense in my mind. And it's a good way to get some conversations going. But I've been blogging for a couple different years at that point, trying to just build an audience, help couples before there's problems or they're experiencing serious problems. And anytime I wrote on the topic of sex, it was really well received. And those were always the higher traffic, higher comment. And so I just got this thought of there needs to be some resources out there that talk about married sex in a value-based, God-honoring, marriage-honoring way, with health as the goal, with growth as the goal, not just a good time, anything goes that the world often proposes.
Right.
And so I reached out at the time. I'm married to a woman, it's a CPA, been married to her for 28 years. And at the time she was like, no way. I'm behind the scenes. I help with the business, but not in front of people, but behind helping you. And so I reached out to a colleague that I had run across years prior as a coach, and she and I launched it. She was with me as a co-host for 2 years. She needed to transition to do something else. Found another woman in the field that had extensive books on the subject in the Christian arena, Shannon Etheridge. And so she was with me for 4.5 years as a co-host. She needed a transition to deal with just some life stages and changes and some personal and business things. And so now for the last 3 years almost, my wife has been my co-host. So there's been tremendous growth for both of us on doing the show, for ourselves too, on just talking bluntly and honestly about what goes on behind closed doors. She's now my regular co-host, and then we bring on guests and experts every so often to round out conversations and go areas that I'm not as expert in. I want to get various views and voices on the show too, because good data helps people, I believe.
Yeah. It's kind of cool to co-host a show with your wife, isn't it?
It is now. The first year, having already done it for 6 years, 6.5 years, it was not as comfortable because she was invading my territory. And so it took a while for us to kind of get our voice and how to have an on-air personality and let our life shine through some, but still not have it be about us, but to have it be about the nation, which is listeners, that we want to help people where they are and help them get better.
And then you also have a family practice. And after we learn a little bit about that, we're going to get into some of the topics that you've brought up that you and I had an initial conversation. And you said something that I have actually said on the show, and I want to definitely touch on that. But tell us a little bit about your practice and what caused you to get into marriage and family therapy. I find it interesting.
Well, so I've been in private practice since 2002, graduated with a PhD in 2006. This is something that runs in the family. I was raised by a family that's a father that's in sociology and psychology. I have a sister that's a social worker, and a mom that's crazy. That's kind of the joke that we say. But it's something I knew. I was raised in systems all the way through, in the way my dad talked and interacted and everything. So I kind of knew I headed into the ministry initially, and I knew I would eventually head into the field as a therapist, in some way, shape, or form. And family therapy is what I love. More particularly, marriage therapy is what I love. Is dealing with the couple as a whole and as a unit, because it's a system in and of itself, and there's nothing else like it. Parenting is a close second, but there's nothing else like the tension and the drama and the pleasure and the fun and the pain and the turmoil and the grief and the tragedy and the terroristic tendencies we all have that happen in marriage. I love all of that stuff.
Well, that was a loaded answer. I'm not even going to start picking that apart. You Texans, man, you never know what we're going to get from you guys.
Well, but if you've been married any length of time, you know I'm speaking the truth.
That's right. Oh, man. All right. So when we initially talked, you said something, and you said it on your website quite well. And I'm going to read this the best I can for a blind guy. But you said marriage is more about becoming a better human than it is about the two people being happy. And when you keep things simple, you can experience more in marriage and in life. Let's break that down in two separate parts. I love the part about what marriage truly is about, but I also want you to talk about keeping it simple and what that means.
Okay.
So tell everybody what you mean by it's not necessarily happiness isn't your primary goal here. It's about growing as a person. And isn't that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Because I believe one of the things that has really harmed a majority of marriages is I'm no longer happy.
Yep.
And I think that's more of a state of our being statement than the state of our relationship statement, because I think happiness nowhere, if you have a biblical framework, is happiness talked about as a promise.
Yeah.
It's just not there. I think God cares more about our character, our integrity, and our wisdom development than he does about us having a good time while here on earth. And so I think what would be one of the best ways and mechanisms to have people develop into better people, well, put them in a relationship that they love and hate.
Yeah.
Right. Because you can't hide who you are in marriage. Your spouse sees you at your best and at your worst. The joke I always have is when we meet and fall in love with somebody, we've met their marketing department and they ours. And then when you go into that relationship any length of time, you start to meet the back office.
Yeah.
And you meet who they really are. And so that's an exposing of ourselves. And if I can view it right, I can do better and I can grow, and I can see that my spouse challenges me to be better, not just for their own enjoyment, but because it's hard to live with the worst in us at times.
Yeah.
And I don't like the worst in me at times. And so I think if I can view marriage as this is not about happiness. Happiness is something we may find along the way, but happiness is always found in pursuit of something else that's more meaningful. It's not an end in of itself.
Yeah. Well, three things came to me. I don't know if I can remember them all off the top of my head, but I always think about Proverbs 27:17, talking about this very thing. Iron sharpens iron.
Yep.
As one man sharpens another. Well, that's marriage. Bible clearly says it's not good for man to be alone. Two are better than one. But what is marriage truly? If you do it God's way, what truly is marriage? Selflessness, humbleness, putting someone else first, not you, and looking out for the interest of the other person before your own. Now, if you can't do that, there's a lot of room to grow as a person, which is exactly what you just talked about, right?
Right. But I think you have to add another little tweak to that caveat.
Tweak it. Let's go.
Because the idea of, if I'm going to practice selflessness, that's presupposing there is a self to give of.
Sure.
And so this is the development of myself. Because I think sometimes we go to extremes as humans, right? It's that idea of it's all about me, or it's all about somebody else, and I'm just a doormat. And no, that's right. How do I find that spot in the middle where there's harmony of
I love that
happening?
Yep. Well, and that's the way it happens if your spouse acts in the same way.
Right.
If you're putting your partner first, then there is a middle ground, because you both get to give and take without too much selfishness involved, because the other one wants to give, you want to give. Well, let's meet in the middle and do its best.
Right.
Well, and then there was something else that you said, but of course I've done forgotten it. So let's, I told you that was, I get on these little rabbit trails and then I have a hard time getting back. So the growth thing is powerful. Then you talked about keep it simple. Right. Explain that, because I'm telling you right now, before you get into this, that is my mindset. I just go simple. Now, tell me what you mean by keeping it simple.
So this is predicated on the idea that what if that marriage actually is designed for something else? What if there's something else going on? And if I can reframe that, that simplifies things, because there's some fundamental life forces at play that we cannot change. I mean, the most obvious one, obviously, with science is gravity. Doesn't matter what I want to do, I cannot change gravity. Wind is the same thing. I cannot change it. And so too often we complicate things by going outside and yelling at the wind as if it would change something, rather than, no, it won't. And so the more I can recognize there are forces at play, how do I harness those suckers? That simplifies it. The other aspect of it is when I can keep my life more simple, and in my case, it's more minimalistic. I own things, it's a few things, and I want them to be good things, but I don't need a ton of things, because the more you own, the more it owns you, is a truism. It just is always there. But it's so the more I can just keep it simplified with the way I go about life, the more the important can remain important, because I've got more margin in my life. And so a lot of it becomes just, how am I conducting all of my life, rather than I'm aspiring for whatever the next greatest thing could be, because that always changes. And if I believe what the world puts out, life would just be better if I got a good Honda. And no, not necessarily, because they're going to have another good one come out too. And so it's just, how do I just keep it as succinct and simple as possible? I think that just helps us keep what's important and not get overrun by the immediate.
Are you saying to be content?
Well, I think that's something we have to learn. I don't think that's part of our DNA is contentment, right? I think it's a learned thing, and that fits right in easily with character and wisdom development.
Well, Paul talked about in Philippians 4, being content. He said he's had it all and he's had nothing. And in all things, he's learned how to be content, because I can do all things through Christ. And the context of that was contentment.
Right.
So that's what
because he had set up the idea of, I've had everything, I've had nothing. Same thing with Solomon, right? I've had everything and I've had nothing, and it all boils down to nothing. But it's still just, it's my perspective of how I view what's going on. And being content with what I've got, knowing today's got enough troubles of it on. I mean, you could apply all kinds of scriptures to any kind of points you want to make a lot of times.
So
they all fit seamlessly typically.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so many tie-ins. I mean, when I teach from scripture, I mean, I've been on 2 verses for like 4 to 6 weeks now. Right. Because there's just so much to unpack when you start digging down. But so are you able to, Mr. Therapist, let's reverse that. You talked about keeping it simple, but tell us what not keeping it simple is and the complications that can actually cause within your marriage. How's that for a loaded question?
No, so a lot of times what you're describing then is this idea that when I complicate things, there's usually a motivation underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's because I don't want to deal with whatever it is that might be going on, which simple doesn't mean easy. And that's probably a good way to begin this dialogue on this segment, at least, is I need to recognize that I cannot change my spouse as much as I want to. I could change spouses, but I cannot change my spouse. So when I can come to grips with that fact, maybe I start to address how I go about it. And the phraseology I use is all I can do is present something I believe is worth wanting and answer honestly the question of what I want to be married to me. Because that'll give me good data to realize here is how I am getting in my own way and yet sophisticatedly blaming my spouse. And so if I can see it through this lens of, okay, if I just we focus on this, we add this component, we go get this next thing. This is the next, where I'm complicating life. I'm avoiding the issues a lot of times. And that sometimes is my motivation. It's just a whole lot easier to do all this and stay busy rather than fight. But what if fights are actually a good thing if I do them well?
Yeah.
And I confront well and I deal, I kind of stay in my own sphere better rather than I'm yelling at the wind, which is I need my spouse to change their ways because it would just make it more comfortable for me. But in reality, no, it wouldn't in the long run.
One thing that came to mind earlier, and this is one of my points, and I think you kind of touched on it even right there, is when I am dealing with something, I have tried to get into a habit of saying, hey, God, what are you trying to teach me in this right now?
Okay.
And I have to sit back and just kind of pray and just let God talk, and just expose maybe some of my weaknesses. And he's done that. And that's never really easy, but it's exactly what you said at the very top, growth.
Right.
Growth. And it makes me a better man, not just for my wife, but for the people around me as well. Right.
No, and that's because I think the whole process of marriage that we're talking about here, right? It's that idea of there's something else going on. When we got married, the story didn't end.
Right.
Right. It's just beginning.
That's right. Yeah.
And you can even add a component of when you hit gridlock and you hit this point where maybe I married the wrong person. That's when marriage really begins. Or when you get to this point of I can never get them to give in on this. Well, that's when marriage is beginning. So there's so many points of this whole process is going on that it really just comes down to how am I viewing it?
Mm-hmm. Well, right now we're talking to Dr. Cory Allen out of Texas. Cory, why don't you tell them, I call you Cory because that's just a friendship thing.
No problem. That's the way I call myself too. So.
Okay, good. Why don't you tell everybody your website before we move on and how to get a hold of you?
So the easiest way to find me is one location, and that's at smrnation.com. That is the housing of everything that I do with the podcast, the coaching, the therapy, the books, the courses, everything is all right there.
Definitely check that out. It is a loaded bunch of information he presents. And I'm telling you what, the podcast is really good. I enjoyed what I've heard of it so far. And I'm not a podcaster as far as listening very much because when I'm working, it'd be a great time to listen to it, except I have a screen reader and I'm a man, 2 voices at once. This doesn't work. Now, and going back to I don't know if you would call this your common core, but you listed 5 points on your site. And if you could touch on those, we have about another 10 minutes. So I would like for you to touch on those because I find it interesting. Like your first, I guess you could say, goal is to help people grow deeper spiritually.
Right.
How about the importance of that, especially in marriage?
Well, this is that idea of we are not the end all be all, whether that spiritual component is attributed to God or just something beyond us. I think most everybody has a fundamental belief that we're not the center of the universe, despite what we'd like to think.
Yeah.
So I think if I can recognize an interconnectedness with things other than myself, in my case and in your case, and in probably a majority of your audience's case, it's God, right? It's the one true God. So I think that there's an element when I can see it as such that this is not just about me. This is about being a part of something bigger. It changes the whole paradigm of what's going on, because I think we also realize that the times where I've had the most struggle in my life have been the times where I was the center of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't fulfill, and it didn't last, and it didn't what have you. When I can see it as, wait, what if this is something bigger going on? I think that settles us, where I feel like I've got a perspective and I fit in something larger than myself. And I think that's what we all want as a human.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you think that when you try to fulfill yourself on the fleshly realm, it's always going to end up empty?
Absolutely. Well, everything that the world has to offer ultimately will not satisfy.
Mm-hmm. Trying to fulfill a spiritual need with a fleshly resolution doesn't work.
Yep. Right. So I think it's imperative that we recognize there's something deeper going on. And so how am I growing in that area?
So we talked about your number 2 point, keeping it simple. So let's move on to number 3. Be passionate. I love that one.
I do too. And this is just that idea of, I think too often we keep this mindset that something other than me will bring me passion, rather than how am I bringing passion to whatever I'm doing. And that's, to quote Mike Rowe with the Dirty Jobs, that's one of the things he discovered was the idea of, a lot of what we do in life, maybe it doesn't produce passion, but I can bring a passion to it.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's good.
One of the things we've done in my family is, I was raised in a household that I was the one that unloaded the dishwasher as a kid, and I hated it. Anytime I'd see that light on, I hated it. And so now that I have kids, guess who unloads the dishwasher?
I don't know. How many guesses do I get?
Well, but what we do is we try to make it a game. We try to have fun with it. And my passion is having fun with what I do in life.
That's right.
Even just the other day, I came walking into the kitchen, and my wife had a timer running, and she and our son, who's 14, were unloading the dishwasher as fast as they could, trying to break our record of how fast can we do it without breaking anything. I jumped in to help. And so it's just, how can I make some of the different things we do fun? That's passion to me.
I love that. And I'm telling you, if my wife was with us at this very second, she would tell you that's my personality. I mean, I was at the doctor last week. I was getting COVID tested. I was getting tested for pneumonia, and I was just having a ball. Mm-hmm. And it's just the way I think. It's like with the blindness, and it says this in my book, I could get out of bed every morning, throw myself on the floor, kick, scream, whine, moan, groan, complain, question God, and I get up and I'm still legally blind. What's the point? That's why the book's called Stop Your Whining. Instead, I get out going, God, how can I glorify you today, even through the vision issues? And I just have fun with it. Crack on my vision. I love it. Let's have fun with it. When I used to be a single dad of 3 kids. We'd go to the grocery store, and everybody that probably has never heard the story may have just moaned like, oh my gosh, a single dad taking 3 kids to the grocery. I did exactly what you said. We made it fun. I made it, hey guys, you get to do this, and you get to pick out this, and help me pick out this. And you know what? I never had a single issue. And it was always fun. They looked forward to that trip to the grocery store. So you can do it. You can unload in the dishwasher. Thanks, because I think I still have to do that when we're done here.
Well, you know what? It's the same kind of thing. I can see that light on and moan and groan and complain. And when I'm done complaining, I still have that light on and the dishes are clean and need to be put away.
So number 4, live in community with others.
Absolutely. We are relational beings at our core. But yet we still fight that fundamental force of, I want to be the master of my own fate and not subject myself to anybody else's tyranny. So this is a truism of what's going on in the world in which we live, that I want to still have my own voice, but life is better with other people. And so marriage is one of those, but beyond that, my community is important too, whether it's God's community of faith and believers, whether it's neighbors, whether it's family members, whether it's coworkers. I think it applies to all. We need a lot of circles to have a fulfilled life.
I love, of course, this is a marriage show, and I love in Genesis where it says it's not good for man to be alone. And I think it's creative how God does things. The word alone, listen, you're going to love this. It is not good for man to be alone. The word alone in Hebrew is bad. B-A-D. That is the Hebrew word for alone. It's bad. There's a little trivia. Bring that up as a riddle. Mess your pastor up. Whatever you could do. I just love that. I think that's pretty awesome. Fifth point before I get off and have way too much fun. And I'm doing exactly your fifth point right now. Enjoy the ride. Right. Because that's the idea of what are we really in control of? Mm-hmm. Right. It's just, I can think of it as I am a lot more influential on the things that happen in my life, or I'm not. And I mean, your journey obviously is a great testament to this, what the world has gone through and is going through now with COVID and a pandemic. How much do we really control in this world, right? We like to think we control a lot, but in reality, we don't. It's a collaboration at best with our fellow humans. But then there's also forces at work that, how do I stare it in the eye and realize I don't have control over what happens, but I have control and responsibility of how I approach what happens and respond to it. That's right. And again, that was kind of in the book and the whole point, because I wrote the book after becoming legally blind and then after becoming a widower. Right. And so what do? Those things exactly like you said were 100% out of my control. Right. So you just have to do the best you can, put your feet on the ground, move forward. And the more you look backwards, the more you're going to get a crick in your neck and probably run into a wall. So keep your eyes straight ahead. And I think these 5 points are really good, especially for marriage. Enjoy the ride, be passionate. What if, Cory, spouses would direct their passion toward their spouse? Wouldn't you think there'd be a lot less issues in marriage? I mean, you're still going to have some. Sure. But if you would focus on your spouse and pursue them, which is actually in Genesis, it tells us to pursue our spouse when it says cleave to your wife. Study it. It's in there, the Greek. I'm sorry, the Hebrew. All of these things that you mentioned, keep it simple, be passionate, enjoy the ride, community, all of that stuff. What if we just applied those simple things, those 5 simple things, spiritual growth? My go-to verse is Hebrews 13:4. Marriage is to be held above all. Right. And I love that verse, especially when you study it. Marriage is to be respected, honored, treasured, and valued above all. It's what it says. It's the only way to put it. I love that verse. It's pretty powerful. So that's good. Well, once you tell them one more time how to find you. So it's at smrnation.com is my online home, and where everything I do lands there. Fantastic. It's a great podcast. You guys will get a lot out of it. Make sure to go check it out. Dr. Cory Allen, thank you so much for joining us. It was such a pleasure talking to you. Thanks, man. This has been fun. Marital Monkey would like to thank the Sicilian Bank, where the loans are as diverse as their customers. Based in Hardin County, Kentucky, the Sicilian Bank is your hometown connection with a touch of personal class. Large enough to cover all of your banking needs and small enough to know you by name and not by number. The Sicilian Bank, treating you like you are somebody. Give them a call at 270-982-4TCB at their website, www.thesicilianbank.com. Thank you to the Sicilian Bank, member FDIC and equal housing lender. NMLS number 409707. Thank you, everybody, for listening on this beautiful Thursday. We hope you enjoyed Dr. Cory Allen. We thank him for joining us. Remember, my wife and I are both certified relationship coaches. I am a master certified relationship coach. So if you guys are looking for any additional help, please get a hold of us. We'll work with you. We want to help, and we just have a passion for this. So get a hold of us, 833-8-JUNGLE or www.maritalmonkey.com. Have a great Thursday, everybody.